It's a sci-fi show for babies, you know?
We're too old to watch this show.
We truly are. What are we doing?
Let's wrap it up. I know it's the season's finale right now, but you know what? Let's stop it.
We should end this podcast immediately.
Hi, welcome to the Impossible Podcast, where we're sending live to you from the Impossible Planet. My name is Wendela.
My name is Clara.
And today's episode is going to be about the Interstellar Song Contest.
Our station is actually queued to receive the Interstellar Song Contest, even though it's really far away. And Wendela's a big fan, so we have a lot of expert opinions in this episode.
Resident Eurovision fan.
Not a big Eurovision fan, but I did queue in this year, courtesy of this Doctor Who episode, and courtesy of my boyfriend, who is a big fan. And it was a lot of fun. It's scary. This year was scary, I must say.
So, yes, I prepared a summary of the episode, so...
As per usual, we are on the space station on board Krop Tor, and we are being propelled into a black hole as we speak. So we are going to have to time Wendela's summary, and I think I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Does
2 minutes?
Sound good?
I have not practiced, so we're going to truly see if it takes 2 minutes this time.
I think it's good. I believe in you.
Yes, okay.
3, 2, 1.
Okay,
Go.
so the Doctor and Belinda lands way in the future, where the Eurovision Song Contest is still living on in form of the Interstellar Song Contest. And we have a Bonnie and Clyde situation of 2 Helions, this new alien race we are introduced to, who seeks revenge on the Interstellar Song Contest because of their main sponsor having eradicated their whole planet. They plan to do this through launching the whole arena's audience into space and sending out a delta wave that will kill the watchers of the broadcast. The Doctor and Belinda, through this launching into space, are separated, but they both survive this event, but they're split up. Belinda ends up with one of the contestants in the competition, the main competitor, who is actually, in fact, a Helion too, but she's cut off her horns that are her main signifier of being of this race. And this is revealed in a very emotional realization. The Doctor, however, ends up with a nurse and a hologram engineer, and together they break the Helion's plan of launching the delta wave, and they end up at the main control board, where the Doctor has a rage moment and starts beating up one of the Helions that are behind this takeover. Belinda catches up to them at the very last second and stops the Doctor, and after they've done that, with help from the nurse, they get all the people that have been launched into space back into the arena and revived. At the very end, Mrs. Flood, it's turned out that she is Thorani, and she bi-generates. So that is the whole of the episode. The big reveal. Oh, that was close. Without the stuttering, it's probably gonna be fine.
Yeah, well, with some editing magic.
With some editing magic. That was 2 minutes. Cool.
Cool. Oh my god, what an episode.
What an episode. I feel super cliche to say, but I think every single episode has become another "this is the best episode of the season so far" moment. This was one of those.
Definitely. But this one was a cut above. I mean, the budget, the special effects, the really powerful moments. I mean, it was slick. Not that any of the other episodes haven't looked good, but this one was just visually insane.
I was fearful that it's gonna be a lot of visual effects going into this episode, but looking at all the practical effects in the actual episode, making all these different sets. I know we've complained a little bit about every episode being set in a very small space. This has a lot of practical sets, and I think that's very well spent post for the budget. I really enjoyed that part. It's one of the main strong points, I think.
And I also think some of the green screen work was just incredibly effective. Like the shots where the arena people get sucked into space, when the Doctor is floating, everything was just so well made. Beautifully put together. I think the shot when the Doctor is floating in like a backbend was just incredible. I remember my boyfriend, who's a huge cinephile, remarked out loud that was a good shot, and he's never said that when talking about Doctor Who, let me tell you.
Oh my
like,
goodness.
This is a non-fan being like blown away. He did say that he would have preferred it if it was a wide shot, but like, you know, come on. it was gorgeous.
Shout out Clara's boyfriend.
Shout out my boyfriend. It was just visually insane. I think the pacing was great. You felt like you were transported. I mean, I was screaming, jumping up and down. I was so excited for this episode because the marketing for it had been minimal, or at least I had no idea what to expect going into it, and I think that it hit all the right points. Like, the initial impact was just incredible. The visual impact was just, yeah, it's some of the best visual like scenes and snapshots and some of the most like harrowing visual language that Doctor Who has ever had, in my opinion.
I felt so comfortable having the themes actually come together with the cryogenics of having a host be preserved to survive so many contests, and then we get a throwback to the same theme when he goes, oh no, not again. We know, we get, it just translates so well that of course they're gonna still be preserved. That's like what's going on here. I love that.
Exactly. It doesn't let you be scared for too long, which I appreciate, because I feel like that initial scene of all the people being sucked into space, I mean, I don't know how you felt, but I was genuinely horrified. Like, that was a horrific imagery. That was so scary. But then having Ryland say, oh no, not again, you kind of instantly get the sense of comfort that like,
oh yeah,
okay, they're not actually going to kill 100,000 people in this episode. Like, we are going to be able to reverse everything, but in a way that isn't magical, in a way that still feels scientific.
They're so helpless, right?
Yeah, and at the same time they're so helpless. I think that's an excellent balance to toe. There are some aspects of this episode that isn't really believable. I think we'll get into that later, but I think at least that aspect, it feels very well justified, that we can have that moment of being terrified but also feeling safe, that we'll be able to save the day at the end. I think they towed that line really well.
Yeah, it really emphasized the fact that we didn't really know how it's going to turn out, whilst still giving us these really realistic elements. Just the engagingness of having a mystery that is like, okay, I can see how there's points that are going to help us survive this, but how? Just no idea how. Actually, sometimes when you've seen a Doctor Who episode, you kind of wish you could wipe your memory before watching it again, because the reveals are kind of what drives the story. But in this episode, nothing really relies on having that surprise element, and I really enjoyed the rewatch, and I think it almost gets better because it doesn't really matter that you know the outcome. The emotional points are still there, so I really enjoyed the rewatch. I think this is gonna hold up the test of time, just from my little experience with rewatching it. I think it's gonna last a long time too.
Definitely, and I think it also hits a lot of thematic points that are sort of common to the Russell T Davies pantheon of storytelling. Like, that's this
Satellite 5.
Satellite 5, very like satirizing TV, satirizing like shows that we all know, and also problematizing, putting a really bizarre sci-fi twist on everything, and also trotting that line between genuinely terrifying and really goofy. Like, you know, when Belinda's having that extremely well acted nervous breakdown because she just witnessed like a mass terror murdering of 100,000 people, and also her only savior, her only way to get back home has been lost to her, and she's completely alone, and she's just like collapsing. And then at the same time we have DUGGA DOO. That's such a funny like juxtaposition, and I think this episode really straddles the comedic elements and the genuinely horrifying elements extremely well. It doesn't feel like whiplash at all in the way that media that tries to be comedic and scary at the same time often kind of it kind of falls apart and you feel whiplash. I think this straddles the line so incredibly well, and it manages to be really funny and really scary at the same time. It really keeps you on your toes, and just like you said, even on a rewatch, you still feel that hype and you still feel those emotional points. But I just want to say, Verida, just incredible acting, incredible work on this episode. Oh my god.
I'm gonna bring up a
Impossipod
residential point here of I feel the lack of in-between episodes for this episode.
Oh yeah.
The emotional progression of Belinda and the Doctor it feels like it's lacking progression-wise, we just jump straight into it.
Yeah.
The emotions are very big, and I don't really feel like they're earned to be that big. And this is maybe probably a personal opinion, I felt like when they launched all the people in this space, it's so visually goofy and beautiful in a sense, because you don't really see the actual people, you just see this shape of people floating and this big wave of people floating. I thought it was just so visually engaging that I forgot about the real element of 3,000 people being launched into space.
100,000.
100,000. Okay. Yeah. I'll just flip it over.
100,000.
This is too funny. We cannot do numbers. There's no numbers.
Have we ever said numbers right in a single episode? I don't think so.
I don't think so. No, I kind of forgot that people kind of died, so I thought that she became so emotional, and also the way that makes the doctor become emotional later on. I had to remind myself, like, oh yeah, right, people were dying, that's why we were upset. And we haven't really seen how, logically we've seen how reliant Belinda is on the doctor for taking her home. Just feel like I had to think about it to realize it. I didn't like that. I would have really been helped having in between episodes to sell that.
Yeah.
But I get it, I buy it logically. Emotionally, like feeling a sense of having that be true was kind of lacking for me, and maybe that's on me, but that's how I felt.
I think another aspect that stuck with me was when the doctor said, "You're finally getting it. I knew you would start to enjoy to travel with me." I think that's fun, but it's also kind of scary in the sense that Belinda has never had a choice, and I remember that was the big emotional grappling point that we both felt after watching the first episode of this show, The Robot Revolution, that like...
I thought that theme was gonna be more central throughout the whole season.
Exactly, and I feel like we've kind of lost sight of the fact that Belinda has had no choice in traveling with the Doctor, and her developing trust in him and her developing affection for him has been kind of put on the back burner.
I thought it was such an efficient theme actually to put in the story, because we haven't had stories like that. I thought it was a really fun way of making this show seem more modern, more caught up with modern sensibilities and how we interact with media and having parasocial relationships. I still think there is an element of that could be further explored in the season, so I feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity because we haven't had that in Doctor Who before.
Well, I think this is one of the only times that Doctor Who hasn't shied away from the fact that the Doctor's companions are so incredibly dependent on him and are put in real actual danger for the sake of adventure and for the sake of keeping him company, and that's a really incredible, bold direction to go in with a companion, to like really problematize the relationship between the Doctor and their companion. And I think that the season hasn't had enough time to fully explore that, simply because we've been shoved into life or death situation, into another life or death situation. You know, it's like we haven't had time to marinate in the fact that Belinda hasn't actually chosen to be here out of genuine affection for the Doctor. She is completely reliant on him, and this is the first time we've had her acknowledge that, you know, she can be scared of it, she doesn't always know how he's going to act, but also she genuinely likes him, she genuinely has a fun time adventuring. And I think it was a fun line to kind of bring us back into that thematic space of not being sure if Belinda is safe and not being sure if Belinda should actually trust the Doctor.
Definitely. No, I wish that would just have been a bit more explored.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think having some more in between episodes, more banter, more showing how the contrast within her feelings and the complexity of her feelings of being totally reliant on the Doctor, as well as being kind of intrigued by this lifestyle going on. I feel like had there been more episodes, there's so much more that could have been explored.
Yeah, and that's one of those recurring problems with this era, that like we have so little room and it's not easy as a writer to fit all of that in, like to have the standalone themes of the episode but then also the overarching theme of the season, and having those those coalesce in a way that makes sense. I think that they managed to do that really well this episode, and I appreciate the incorporation of the overarching arc of the Earth disappearing and Belinda being all alone and being reliant on the Doctor, but then also the actual events of this episode. I think they did it well this time.
I want to talk about that, but I also have another point to bring in. Because I started rewatching Doctor Who with my girlfriend to try and get her into Doctor Who,
Nice.
and we got no further than 2 episodes in.
Oh, did you start from season 1, like from Rose?
From season 1, Rose,
Yeah.
End of the World. And I actually realized how, after watching the Robot Revolution, that there's actually a scene within End of the World where Rose is stuck in one of the observation decks together with this one service worker, and she has this exact moment of, I don't even know who he is. I just jumped at the opportunity of go traveling.
Exactly.
So actually I realized that we have explored this a tiny bit before, just as a tiny throwaway point. And having watched the Robot Revolution and sitting with those feelings of how nice it is to explore that aspect of Doctor Who made me appreciate that scene a lot more now rewatching it, because I didn't realize that a reason why that season still feels fully developed is throwaway moments like that. Just a little shout out to that season for doing it.
Yeah, and I think that we've talked about that before while reviewing these episodes, that one thing Russell T Davies has really done coming back to the helm is revisit themes that he has brushed upon in the past, but really deepening them and sitting in them for longer. And I think that it really shows his strength as a writer, his strength when it comes to themes, let's just put it like that, is his way of like revisiting things and making them feel fresh, just in the way that he's satirizing TV and satirizing programs that already exists. He's revisiting that idea, but he does it in a way that feels elevated, that feels modern, and that deepens our understanding of that thematic component. It's not just him repeating himself, and I think that that's brilliant.
I feel like seeing themes through his eyes is really eye-opening. Like, he sees the world in this really different lens to it feels like everyone else does. It's so eye-opening every time he goes into those themes. It's like, oh yeah, of course, that makes so much sense. He's got so much intelligence within that sense, and he can just comfortably explore it.
Exactly. So I think that Belinda had a really strong episode, and also just to brush up on some other points that I've been making in previous episodes. Me personally, I was quite disappointed with the end of Lucky Day, the Doctor going really in on this person, and then in the next episode I kind of pointed out that it would have been nice if Belinda would have been there, because Belinda would have kind of reined in the Doctor. And my theory was that because the Doctor in Lucky Day hadn't met Belinda yet, they were kind of gonna tie in this component of the Belinda, of the Doctor and Belinda becoming better together. And I think that there were shades of that in this episode. Belinda does actually express fear and concern and, you know, not recognizing the Doctor that she's seeing when he becomes really vindictive and threatening. And I think that a lot of characters, even the minor characters in this episode, express fear towards the Doctor. Like there's this line where the Doctor says to, I think his name is Gary, that he likes him, and Gary's like, thank God.
Yeah.
And I really like it when they make the Doctor scary. And I think that this is an episode where they manage to show the Doctor's vindictive, fiery side, but also have just a couple of lines in there to bring us back to Earth and be like, okay, but we remember that the good thing to do is to not torture someone and zap them with a hologram 3 trillion times just because you're angry with them. Like, obviously the villains in this episode are irredeemable and they don't deserve our empathy, but we're also meant to be the good guys, and simply having 1 or 2 lines in there to address that fact does so much for the overall feeling that you sit with at the end of the episode.
I think so too.
And I think that as a whole the season feels better knowing that this isn't going unaddressed. Like that really icky feeling you get at the end of Icky Day. Freudian slip.
That is so funny. I'm keeping it.
The feeling you get at the end of Icky Day it's not as bad when you zoom out in the context of the whole season. And I think that they've gone in a bold direction with the Doctor in this season, making him more fiery, angry, kind of petulant, and not only showing emotion in the terms of crying every episode, but also showing emotion in the sense of like getting extremely angry.
I love a problematic Doctor.
We always love a problematic Doctor. I mean, this is what's fun about Doctor Who, you know?
Really, for sure. And as you, since you brought up Lucky Day, I know that I like the commentary in Lucky Day a little bit more than I like the commentary in this, and I feel like you're the opposite.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't really mind the commentary in Lucky Day that much because I like the thematic progression, and I'm not as tuned into the commentary they were trying to make. I think as I am for this topic, with how the European Broadcasting Union has been very inconsistent in how they regulate political messaging. I had a big personal internal conflict with my relation to Eurovision Song Contest ever since Russia's exclusion of the competition. I think there has been, well, since forever really, but that's the first time when I was really tuned into the fact that there has been a lot of hypocrisy in how the Eurovision Song Contest is policed, and what messaging you can have, what is considered friendly for children, everything like that has been very weird. I think it's
interesting that you can't say serving cunt, but you can broadcast the fact that your country is famous for LSD.
And you can also sing about you can sing about how you're coming, you can sing about innuendos about being the milkshake man, you can where there's a lot of what the hell just happened, you can say perkele, you can say a lot of things, but you cannot say cunt as in the Maltese word for singing. Like,
right.
For children, that's just gonna fly over their heads, and if it doesn't, that is a great opportunity for you to teach your children that there are different languages. Like, that's a learning opportunity, not a derogatory opportunity. And if you're an adult and you take offense to a Maltese word that just sounds exactly the same as a derogatory term in English, that feels incredibly centristic to a worldview where your language is the only language that matters. Low-key problematic take. I don't think that's super unique of me to have that feeling. So
right, and I think in general there's a sense of hypocrisy in the way that they've decided to not include Russia but include Israel, and you know, the fact that we almost had Israel win this year. I mean, a lot of people I think are incredibly unhappy with Eurovision at the moment.
I was gonna think that the most dramatic thing I was gonna watch, emotionally dramatic thing to watch, was gonna be the Interstellar Song Contest of Doctor Who episode.
We were wrong.
Turns out the voting of the of the Eurovision was a lot more tense. So, but
yeah,
alas, we all know how it went. But I feel like, especially as if you're not familiar with the ruling of Eurovision Song Contest, essentially Eurovision Broadcasting Union has decided that the broadcasting channels that are participating, not the countries, have to be non-political in their news coverage, and they have to be politically neutral in their news reporting, essentially. And that is the reason for why Russia is not included, but Israel is, as they deem Israel to be a neutral source of reporting, which I think very few people agree with. And I think especially as the last time Israel was in the competition, the EBU actually helped facilitate a kind of war crime, as Israel marketed occupied land as their own land and marketing it as, come visit this place, and it's literally occupied land, and that is qualified as a war crime. So I think in no way is there an argument that they're politically neutral. And to bring it back to this episode, I think having the song contest be corrupt through their main sponsor makes the conversation a lot less nuanced. It brings us away from this idea that it is the broadcasting union that is actually perpetuating something. It's not just taking money. I feel like maybe there could be a place of arguing that there is a bribery going on. I think in actuality, the real conversation that is trying to criticize is a lot deeper than that. The Eurovision Song Contest was created as a response to the end of the Second World War, trying to create a playing field, celebrating culture within the European continent. So I think for me, because I'm so involved in the actual political landscape of what's going on with EBU and Eurovision Song Contest, I feel like this episode really misses the mark, and especially as it does the same problem as it does with Conrad. Having Conrad be pulled out and just told off, like, you did wrong, you're going into prison now. At the end of this episode is we sing a song and that makes everything fine, but in actuality there's been a big ethnic cleansing. Like, how is singing a song gonna make that right? It fails on the same points I think that Lucky Day does too, that it fails to go into the actual problem and explore it further. I don't know how much I'm gonna cut out from this, but yeah, I hope that makes sense. As an overview.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense, and you know, it's interesting who they choose to problematize, right? Like, they decided to make the main antagonist a rebellious person from the race of people, from the species of people that were ethnically cleansed,
right?
And therefore it becomes kind of a commentary on terrorism and a commentary on what is appropriate to do when you've been through something like that. And if you really look at the episode in a vacuum, obviously we know that terrorism isn't an effective political tool, and that this person decided to kill 3 trillion people in response to what his people went through. And like, in a vacuum, I think they handle that situation well thematically, that like they punish him, they thoroughly like criticize him, but then they also decide to go through proper legal channels instead of just like torturing him for all eternity, right? So I think that makes sense.
And we see the Doctor also struggling with the topic of ethnic cleansing, of course. Like, it does deepen the themes.
Exactly. I mean, it does deepen the themes because we know that the Doctor has personal experience with genocide. The issue is that, first of all, he did the genocide against his own people in some versions of this story, which he conveniently doesn't mention.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just think that's funny. But also, having that be kind of like a oops, I got triggered moment is strange. Like, okay, so you got triggered because you also went through genocide. I just think that's a goofy way to write it.
And then it's fine because he needs Belinda and he brought Belinda with him. As a missing the mark, but trying to make the story still stand. Is that his redeeming feature? He chose to have Belinda around so that he can't go totally out of control. Because I feel like that's not a redeeming feature.
Right. I mean, I think that the Doctor is completely valid in his feelings, and I personally don't mind the fact that he decides to zap this guy several times with electricity and hurt him. I mean, they've definitely made this person a very despicable character. I mean, if you compare him to Conrad, he was intending to do a lot worse with the little power that he has. However, I think it's important to like remember that they've decided to tell this story. They've decided to make the main antagonist that we can actually see and that we can actually interact with be a person from the species that was ethnically cleansed. We don't see anyone from the corporation. We don't have a face, we don't have a voice, we don't have a message from the actual bad guys of this episode. I mean, and I think that in one sense is accurate to the real world, that like a lot of the times people, individuals are fighting the battles of corporations, of unions, and are, you know, enraged and are trying to fight battles on behalf of their own people because they have been used as pawns by big corporations who are just making money. And I think that makes sense, right? If you're going to choose to make that the antagonist, it also matters how you decide to resolve it at the end. And singing a song that instantly solves racism just isn't enough. I think the song was beautiful, and I think that what they're trying to say is that, like, how do we bring awareness after an ethnic cleansing? Is it by killing more people? No, it's about spreading awareness and like, you know, making sure that the people who survive are being continuously oppressed afterwards. Like, I
Right.
totally get that. It's just that it does fall flat when we have actual real world comparisons in real life. Like, if we're talking about the big situation right now, we have Israel-Palestine, and if you're trying to say that the Hellions are kind of like Hamas, they're a terrorist organization that are using the wrong methods, but actually what we should do is that we should let go of all arms and just sing a song. It's like, okay, obviously you're criticizing the methods of political actors who are doing something horrible, but then you're telling people to just be like, I'm proud of my country. It's like, really? I don't know, like, that feels wrong.
I feel like the point of the episode is trying to lead us into we should have a voice for all sides, right? We should have probably Palestine be able to compete in the competition. However, I feel like it does not address at all, if it's trying to do real life commentary, it doesn't address at all the problems with the EBU's political standings on the competition or inclusion of countries that are committing war crimes. So I feel like that's not a very apt comparison, as well as the Helions actually being representative of this rebellion group is, I think, another place where this episode is kind of missing the mark. As to pull in a real life comparison, we had Iceland be thrown out of the arena during the voting segment a few years back because they held up Palestine banners. They were thrown out of the arena, and it's not Palestinians, it's Europeans in general protesting against the Eurovision dances on this. So that's another point, another reason why it feels like this episode kind of misses the mark for me.
Well, I think that it's difficult when you're writing sci-fi. We had a comment on our episode about Lucky Day, which was something along the lines of, you know, when you're writing science fiction and you're trying to include politics, there's never going to be a one-to-one comparison,
Right.
and it's not fair to always compare things directly and be like, okay, I disagree with how you decided to represent this. And I think that in this case we have a lot of muddled metaphors and a lot of correlations between real life events and what they decided to do in this episode that don't really make sense. And I think that sometimes, I guess, it does help to just kind of try and not think about the real life situations and just focus on the episode, and does the episode make sense? And
Yeah.
I think that I wasn't able to do that in Lucky Day simply because it felt so direct.
I think you're exactly getting to the point of why this episode was so uncomfortable for me, because I cannot
Right.
turn it off for this episode, even though I wish I could, because honestly I'm not that bothered by the messaging of we should hear out all sides, but having it be compared to this real life issue, it really bothers me.
Yeah.
I can't separate
Right, and
it.
I think that's what bothered me so much about Lucky Day, because it made me feel annoyed about like how they're deciding to criticize people on the alt-right, how they're deciding to portray this discourse between conspiratorial thinking and pseudoscience, but then also having UNIT actually kind of be undemocratic
Right.
in certain ways. Like, that just fell apart for me, and that really annoyed me, when in this sense, like, I'm not actually invested in the politics of Eurovision, and even though obviously I care very deeply about the Israel-Palestine situation, Doctor Who has tried to do Israel-Palestine before.
Right.
I mean, they did that with the freaking Zygons, and it sucked ass, it didn't work, and we know that about Doctor Who. Like,
Right.
I mean, it's a sci-fi show for babies. It's a sci-fi show for babies, you know?
We're too old to watch this show.
We truly are. What are we doing?
Let's wrap it up. I know it's the season's finale right now, but you know what? Let's stop it.
We should end this podcast immediately.
We should never watch Doctor Who again.
We are both clear over 22 years old. This is embarrassing. I'm just kidding. But
No, that was time's up.
cut the cameras. Deadass.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye! Yeah, no, but this one didn't bother me as much, and it bothered you. I think that it just shows that Doctor Who is trying to include current day events and current day sensitive politics stuff. And I think when we were younger and we were watching Doctor Who 10 years ago, it didn't bother us as much because we were like,
Turns out that kind of matters. how old you are.
Turns out it matters how old you are, it matters how involved you are in the real life discussions that are being referenced in the episode. And I guess I'm kind of realizing that because in reality there's nothing about this episode that is worse or better than political stuff Doctor Who has done in the past. I mean,
Right.
crying out loud, the Ood were meant to be like a commentary on slavery, and like, I mean, that's goofy as hell. So obviously an episode about the Eurovision Song Contest where there's a, you know, like a massive terror instance and all of that, obviously it's going to come up a little bit goofy and missing the mark. I mean, I think that makes sense, but it's always valid to talk about it, right?
You know, putting it like that, this is one of the more hard-hitting criticisms they've done. It's a lot more one-to-one than a lot of other comparisons they've done. So maybe it's good. Maybe it's
maybe props to them. I don't know.
Maybe props to them, actually. I don't know.
Actually, maybe they kind of swayed.
No, because I feel like having a comparison that completely misses the mark is positive in the direction of it makes it possible to listen to the conflict from both sides. Having a preconceived notion, it makes it a lot more friendly to coming from any side of the conversation.
Well, yeah, and I think the whole point is to put it in a metaphorical space where it's not actually Palestinians, it's the Hellions, and they have silly horns and they dress like edgy, emo, rebel kids that would have a beer at two of us.
Yeah.
You guys listening won't get that reference.
I think every place has that one bar where you know it's gonna be these people.
Yeah, I think every country has the two of us.
No, because I thought about how they put it like the Hellions are represented by these people, but then I thought about it for a second and I realized that they do have another Hellion be in this episode that is very really not the young rebel type person of society, and thinking of it through that perspective, that the Hellions are probably a much more diverse full range society, it does make sense that it's gonna be younger people, the younger people that are kind of fuck society, let's do what we think is best type of people. Those are gonna be the people who are running a rebellion like this. But it does at first glance make you feel like everyone is like this, but actually I think that isn't the implication, even though that's the first
implication.
You know what, I really wonder that how many of the Hellions did actually survive, because we see 3 in this episode. Like, what is the actual stakes? Where are they residing now? Where have they escaped to? How long ago was this? I have so many questions. I want to know more about the Hellions, so much.
Okay, so if we look at the Hellions that have survived and that we meet in this episode, we have that younger generation of rebellious people who want revenge and who want people to see the pain that they've been through and who really want to damage the reputation of the corporation, right? Like, they want people to associate the corporation with this like mass murder of 3 trillion people. That's their stated goal. And then we also have this singer who has, because of racism and because of discrimination, had to hide who she is, and in order to do what she really cares about, which is sing, she's had to pretend that she's from somewhere else, right? And they are angry with her because she has abandoned her past and because she isn't proud of where she comes from. And then they kind of resolve that by having her sing a song about her home country, and I think that is sweet. I think the final song is impactful and really beautiful. I especially loved it when they had those shots of the poppy fields. I think that felt really like, even though we don't see a lot from this planet Helion,
We don't even hear a lot about it because they sing it in a made-up language.
we don't hear a lot about it either.
But you get what it's about. I really like that.
Exactly, they still managed to make that planet feel vivid and to make us get a picture of the Helions as a diverse species of people, and I think they actually execute that pretty well. Like, if we just ignore everything in the real world and the implications of the perfect genocide survivor being someone who sings a pretty song, like, obviously that is problematic, but if we just look at the content of the episode and what they do for the Helions, they have the main character say that, like, you expect us to be criminals, you expect us to be horrible, so that's how I'm acting. But then you have another one being like, hey, we're not criminals, and I'm going to show you that we're not. I'm not going to choose to abide by these stereotypes. I'm going to choose to be brave and stand up for my country. But importantly, she only does that after being pushed by this younger generation, right? And that kind of shows us how as a culture, we have a rebellious shift of people who are going to be fiery and who are going to who are going to want revenge, and then we have kind of an older generation who are more like, okay, but we know that that doesn't work. We know that more terror, fighting fire with fire, doesn't work, and what we need to do is try to find peace and try to be as much as we can like holier than thou. And I think that's what the episode is trying to say. Now, that being said, it's never going to sit right if you try and think one-to-one in actual culture, you know, like how that comes across. But I think that within the bounds of the episode, I think we get a nice story about different people who all come from the same planet and who all have history with each other, trying to grapple with what they went through. And then we also have the Doctor, who himself has, you know, lost his own race, his own species, and trying to grapple with that, and how that brings up anger, but that also brings up a sense of wanting to represent your people and wanting people to remember the Time Lords as a brilliant species who at the end of the day just want to save people, right? So I think that they do manage to bring in a lot of hope and a lot of positive feelings, and I especially like how they manage to make this place feel really vivid in spite of how subjugated the people have been. So if you just look at the episode in and of itself, I think they bring in a lot of nice things. I just think that it's coming out in such a contentious time in the culture.
Especially having it on the same date as the Eurovision. It's always going to be on the nose.
Precisely. However, I think it's clever, because I think it's going to bring in a lot of viewers, it's going to bring in a lot of discourse, it's going to bring in disagreements, and I think it's going to bring in a lot of debating within the fandom, and people who watch Doctor Who also watch Eurovision are going to have a lot of things to say about it.
I feel so bad for the American Doctor Who watchers. Like, what is this competition? What's going on?
If there are any at this point. So I think all in all, the politics discussion is always going to be contentious, and we're going to have people who are really disappointed, and we're going to have people who don't really care, just in the same way that Lucky Day left the fandom sort of divided in how it was perceived.
I think a clever thing they do that actually brings in a really nice element of social commentary when we look away from the actual competition part and the corporation element is usually whenever we tackle genocide in Doctor Who, there's usually the Doctor that comes in and is the good guy, the person that talks down the people from committing counter genocide or whatever it's gonna be in this case. But we also have this second character that, as you say, represent the older generation, but I really like how they show her struggle and how brave, how much she's put in to be this perfect representation. Like, we give a real sense of her struggle in trying to be good representation, the suffering that comes with being a perfect representation, being a person who just is perceived as a non-Hellion, to be accepted by society and try and have your message be perceived despite the disposition of being immediately perceived as, when Belinda gets the introduction to the Hellions, oh, they're like cannibals or something, they use witchcraft. Like, it's so on the nose, but I feel like that it is a really strong moment where they actually point out how discrimination against a ethnic group as a whole works and how wildly inaccurate it usually is. Like, it's so clear that this person doesn't really know why he hates the aliens, but he has this super wild no, they use witchcraft.
They did it to themselves.
They did it to themselves, like, literally. That's what he's saying, and I really enjoyed that aspect we brought in. That is one of the strongest scenes if we look at it commentary wise, and that actually I really enjoyed that part for being in there.
And I also like that at the end, both Kid and Win, the teary-eyed, like, aw, that's my planet in the end. I think that's sweet. And then to segue out of the politics, I want to also give props to everything else in the episode. Like, politics aside, I thought this episode was incredibly funny when the Doctor uses the cannon to propel himself through space, and then he lands and then he faints immediately. It's so funny. I also love the supporting couple, the nurse and the hologram expert,
Gary and Mike.
I love how they establish their relationship so quickly, and they immediately establish this like super relatable couple dynamic between them.
I love a couple that have internal fights about should we be watching this show? This is kind of silly, whatever. I'm trying to respect your love for this show, but I don't know. But then turns out they actually are just incredibly regular people having their own professions and then being these random people that happen to survive. I love when it's so convenient for the plot that the people that survived have the exact skills that they need, but they work it into the story of like, that. No, that's how we got the seats. Like this.
But yeah,
loved it.
It's justified. It's justified. They've thought about everything.
Totally coincidental. It's so convenient, but I love it.
Yeah, it works so well. Exactly. And I think they give very vivid characterization with very few lines. I think they were both funny. They were both well acted. Like me and my boyfriend watching, I was like, that's me. And he was like, yeah, but that's me. And it's like, if you're watching as a couple, especially if you're watching as a couple where one is a Doctor Who fan and one isn't, I think that's a funny dimension to like. Usually when you're watching Doctor Who, there are going to be some people who are really nerdy and really into it, and there are going to be some people who are like, I don't really care. I think that's funny, right? Like that's a funny dimension.
I think it's also fun when the criticism is coming from within the relationship. Like this is just a silly singing show. Like for Eurovision fans, that totally is an apt comparison too. I feel like that can resonate with people who happen to stumble by this episode, and it humanizes the audience of the Eurovision Song Contest too. I think that's such a funny thing to bring in.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that any Doctor Who episode is really as strong as its supporting cast and its supporting characters. And I think that everyone felt vivid and everybody worked well within the episode.
Surprise good gay representation? What?
Yeah, like just simple gay representation, no funny business, just like a normal gay couple having fun and being Eurovision fans, but also being a nurse and like being super nerdy.
They're coded overtly like gay Eurovision fans, but that's not their characters. I love it.
Yeah, I also like just the humor in the episode in general. Like that scene when the Doctor passes out is just so funny. I also like it that Gary and Mike really enthralled with the Doctor in their own way. I think that's funny. It's a funny extra good.
After he stops scaring them.
Exactly, after they're scared. Like they actually have fun and they're being useful and they're being heroes in their own way. I think that's clever. I think that like everything from the cryogenics to the life support systems they have on board, everything comes together in the end and all the mechanics fit together really cleanly. That's nice. I have one big gripe mechanic-wise with this episode, and it kind of brings me back to a criticism I had in Lucky Day, and that's just that they have this reason for them not being able to call emergency services, which is a gambling clause that you can't have any communication from the space station going out during the show because of gambling rules, that like you would be able to transmit the results to the other side of the galaxy and win a bunch of money, and that would just be fraudulent, right? What the fuck? Did nobody think about the fact that there can be mass violence? Is there no mass violence in this world? Like from where we exist today, after Travis Scott Astroworld, after the disaster in the Ariana Grande concert, we know about mass violence, we know about mass terror, and the security in our universe is so high, and we're all so aware of this possibility. Did nobody think about the fact that like maybe they should have police and security, not just drones that can easily be hacked?
This is a really one-to-one comparison with The End of the World. Season 1 episode 2 yet again. They have the same thing where this observation deck is transported to different important events and then it's fully automated, and because it's automated they can easily shut down communication outside wise because there is no no person operating this. So this happens at other times in Doctor Who where they kind of obscure any security part through just having people be taken out of the equation. Like it's automated, there is laws, there is things we can't do anything about type of thing.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of how in Lucky Day nobody was being concerned about Conrad, nobody was doing any background checks on him, nobody like if he's a podcaster who is famous, does he have two separate fan bases? Does he have one fan base that are genuine and one fan base that are... That's so weird weird. And did nobody know that he was part of this like separate public, that he had a separate public persona, and that he was part of a different conspiratorial gang, and did nobody do a background check on him? It kind of reminds me of that.
That he had radical fans? Question mark?
Exactly. And it's like, so nobody's concerned about security in this alternate universe. I find that very strange, and I understand that they need to justify it somehow, and that they need to make it easy for the Hellions to take over, and they also need to make it easy to defeat the Hellions. But like, come on, really? Nobody thought that we should have police on board? Nobody thought that we should have security that can't be hacked?
I think I can kind of see it be this universe, because we haven't this is gonna be leading me into another mechanic thing, or like bigger implications of the episode, and like universe wise. But if it feels like it does bring in an element of people don't give a shit about the Interstellar Song Contest outside of the dedicated fans, which is an element of Eurovision Song Contest. Like, the fans flocked for this competition, but people outside don't really care, and it implies this really brutal universe where if you go there, you might be fucked. That's up to you. Like, we're in this era of the universe where security is super low. We don't care about people's well-being whenever going to a big event like this. There is no security whatsoever. But because in Lucky Day, being on Earth, we have the current day situation of, we know what age and era it takes part in, and we know as people of that era that there should be more security. While as several thousand years in the future, there isn't a thing like that. Like, I could buy that. I don't feel too bothered by it, but also I see how it could be.
But I guess it could also be kind of a nod to how cocky these big corporations can be, that like they think they're infallible, they have control over the narrative, nobody knows that they've committed an ethnic cleansing on Helion, and they're not even bothered by something like they're not even concerned about something like this taking place. And I think it can also be sort of a reference to how mass acts of violence in the past have been possible because of lack of security, and how we often feel wise in hindsight that we add a bunch of security measures to protect people, and that's because we were ignorant in the past to the possibility. I just feel like I don't really know if I buy that. Like, I guess you could make the argument that this corporation, whoever they are, I wish they would have just made it Velengard. That would have made sense.
True.
Like, why is it just the corporation? I think that's so silly. It's silly that it's just like a generic corporation.
Maybe it's a shell corporation for Velengard. Who knows? Maybe they're gonna bring it back.
It could be. Who knows?
No, I think it'd be fun to bring in, this is another war crime that Velengard has made. Like, I think that would have been fun.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. I mean, we have Velengard in several episodes, but it's only been Moffat episodes. It feels kind of a shame to not bring them in any other way. It feels less rich. It feels like, do we really have two giant corporations in this universe who are controlling things?
Anyways, this episode reminds us so much about Satellite 5, with how we're satirizing TV shows and things like that. And also, I wrote in my notes, Satellite 5 Delta Wave all inclusive, because it's part of Satellite 5 lore. It's weird that we didn't take the opportunity to bring in even more references, because this episode really sits in the center of everything that has been going on in the season, which is another element that they play so well with. So maybe it's fine that they missed out on that one, but I thought it would be fun. And
maybe it will be revealed that this corporation is Velengard, and maybe that will be relevant to the finale. We don't know. Let's hope.
Calling it.
I feel like they have in this episode really left this corporation in the background, and in a way it is effective because it focuses on the way that these tragedies have affected real people and have inspired real people to do things in ways that don't actually affect the corporation. Like, people are just kind of fighting amongst themselves, and I feel like that's realistic. But at the same time, I wish we would have had more insight into these random bad guys that are just in the background, and I feel like it loses its impact that the corporation's big event isn't more heavily secured, isn't better insured against this type of violence? Because wouldn't a big mysterious corporation try to protect themselves against this kind of rebellious efforts? Or has there just not been a rebellious effort ever in this universe for 9,000 years? I just find that hard to believe. So that was one point in the episode that kind of fell apart for me, where I was just like, if these are meant to be big scary guys, wouldn't they sort of try to anticipate something like this?
And you know what? Usually when invasions of a planet like Helion is taking place, there's usually a build-up going into it. Like, there's probably been a few hundred years of discrimination against the Helions, so considering how social issues usually progress, it does feel a bit tone deaf to not think that there could be violence going into this.
Yeah, because they are, I mean, it's such an obvious big, huge security failure to not have any emergency services be able to be contacted when you have 100,000 people in one place. Like, that's just obvious. Like, it's just secure your event one-on-one, you know?
I want to bring it back to another thing about the budget allocations and how this episode, some of the things that this episode does really great and makes it more fun, because there's so many layers, and it's for discussion. It really draws you in to think about these more critical aspects of commentary, but I think it's thematically so much fun that, first of all, they brought in this huge cast. Like, I don't feel like we have had a big cast like this for any of the other episodes in the season. There's so many people that we get to know, and I don't feel like any of the characters are lacking. We get to know these characters to an extent that feels realistic. There isn't any bleak background characters, is what I'm trying to say. They still efficiently handle having a big cast like this, and it's expensive to have a big cast like this. And especially, I think it's so much fun that they have, I just pulled up his name because I don't watch the BBC version of of Eurovision, but having Rylan Clark be main host, and that they've just cryogenically had him preserved to host this show over and over again.
It's
and
so
then have
funny.
Graham Norton on. I especially love, as a non-BBC watcher, of course I don't know much about Ryan Clark, but I know Graham because he's a way more central character within the broader Eurovision world. I really love how they play an important role, and we don't need to be very introduced to them. Like, we know what they represent for this competition, and they just explain it to us. I have an interesting thought. Maybe this is just meant to be skipped over, but mechanic-wise, if Graham Norton was killed because the Earth is killed, and then they just preserve his hologram to regurgitate these pieces of information, how did they know to preserve Rylan Clark? How did they know that? Right?
Oh, good point. How has he survived? Somebody must have gone back in time and plucked him out.
I'm thinking.
Because the Earth being destroyed is meant to be a plot reveal. Like, it's meant to be like, oh, so the Earth does still survive because we still have the Eurovision Song Contest.
And also, these humanoid type creatures are implied to be in this world. Ryan Clark is a human, or is he? Is that an implication? Or also, because this is another thing that makes me think that people don't care about the Interstellar Song Contest outside of this little bubble, is that from the well, we know that people don't know about Earth, but then the Interstellar Song Contest is still really reliant on being a reference to the Eurovision Song Contest, originating on the Earth.
Especially since they're still using an Earthling.
Yeah, they're still using an Earthling.
Yeah, and it is implied in the beginning of the episode that Rylan has kind of been keeping at it since current day, right? Since now, and that he's been cryogenically preserved since now. But that doesn't make any sense if the world actually ends on May 25th. So, May 27th? 26th?
May 24th.
24th or 25th? I don't know.
Oh god. Just edit above. Give me an AI voice. I don't care anymore. So that's an interesting point. I hope they put something in to justify that. Like, why is he still alive?
I was thinking about that. And also, is it Susan we're seeing?
Oh my god, Susan. It is Susan. It's the same actress. Yeah, clocked it immediately. Oh my god, so me personally, I love bringing back Susan, but we already teased her last season, and then it ended up being Susan Triad, another Susan. And then we bring Susan back for real this time, then we also have the Rani, and then we have all these different mystery boxes, so it's going to be interesting to see how it all comes together in the end. I'm not sure how Russell T Davies is going to be able to land this plane. There are a lot of things. I'm excited to see Susan, and I hope that they properly bring her back, not just as some kind of weird flashback, but like as like maybe a real character.
I think it's so mysterious the way they bring her in this time. I'm not super mad about how they did it for this episode, but yeah, with having her be teased in the last season, it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention this a little bit earlier, but Russell T Davies teased that there's gonna be the unholy trinity. We know so far it's the Rani, it's Conrad from Lucky Day, but then there's gonna be a third person, because the Rani, both Mrs. Flood and the Rani's new form are counted as the same person. So is it gonna be Ryling Clark? Is it gonna be Susan? Is it?
Well, I don't think it's gonna be Susan. I'm hoping it's gonna be something related to the Timeless Child, just because we've had we've had mentions of the fugitive doctor, and we have reminders that the doctor is an orphan. Hopefully, that will be thematically justified as something related to that plotline.
As the doctor is technically biologically separate from the other Time Lords, that would make Susan even more interesting to the Timeless Child plot, right?
Yeah.
As she's implied to be his biological daughter.
Right. So there's a lot of things floating around in the air. I like the bi-generation. I thought it was cute. I like that the Rani, we have the definite article, and then we have a Rani just running around being like a servant. I think that's cute.
I really like that they're using the Vindicator. I love the Vindicator. I've loved it from the beginning, but now having it be part of the Rani's plan, it tickles me. It makes me happy.
It's fun. It's exciting. So I think in general we're both quite excited for next week. We didn't get a single like tease for what the episode is going to look like or what it's going to be, so I'm very excited.
That's right.
Yeah. It's going to be fun.
I knew going into this episode is going to be the beginning of the unraveling of the season. Like I've been anticipating for this episode so much, but
yeah,
next week is going to be the actual unraveling of everything.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah, it's gonna be exciting. I'm not sure how they're gonna put everything together. I'm hoping that we get real Susan and not just flashback Susan, because I'm a big Susan fan. I love Susan. Yeah, I'm excited.
To not get into the bi-generation part too much, I want to kind of mention that we haven't had any non-bi-generation regenerations so far, so that is really interesting, like how Rusty Davies has implied that we from now on there is always bi-generation, but I feel like maybe it could be a lie.
It's a permanent possibility.
I wonder if it implies anything, because I've started to consider that Rusty Davies is kind of leaning into people's fears about the bi-generation, that it's gonna be a permanent thing from now on. I feel like he's leaning into it, maybe to cover something up. I've gotten maybe that's hopium, maybe maybe it's the fanfictionizing of Doctor Who that's going on in my head, but yeah, and I also think that the problem with mentioning bi-generation again, that has been the problem ever since bi-generation occurred, is the fact that David Tennant is actually just around and alive in this universe and chilling. What? That's always a fact about this era, which is so annoying, that like we actually have a second Doctor canonically out there with a TARDIS, mind you. A second TARDIS?
Using the TARDIS, mind you. A second TARDIS, and that has never been brought back or explored. Because David Tennant is expensive and bringing him back is going to be a massive thing. And I highly doubt that they're going to bring back David Tennant for this conclusion, for this finale.
There is so much going on.
It could be fun, but like that there is a problem with this, right? Which is that there are so many mystery boxes. There's the Pantheon, there's Susan, there's Mrs. Flood, and we also have bi-generation lingering in the background. It's so much, it's so messy.
The Midnight entity, it has escaped. Midnight.
The Midnight entity has escaped, exactly. So there are so many possibilities, and I was underwhelmed with the finale last season.
The Master was killed Question mark?
The master exists in the gold tooth, and somebody has that gold tooth. There is a behind the scenes or like a commentary track clip. Russell T Davies says the Rani, when that hand is coming up taking that tooth. So perhaps the third person who is in this holy trinity is simply just the master. But if we're also going to bring back the master, oh my god, you know?
Maybe that is why they needed the Vindicator to like get a fix on the TARDIS to be able to bring back the master. That could make sense.
That could totally make sense.
I felt like that was a nice just slope of things falling together. So that could be a way to resolve it because it worked so fast.
I'm a little bit concerned. I'm hype about next week, but I'm also scared that we're gonna have another letdown finale. I mean, rewatching the season 1 finale a long time after it was aired and just kind of sitting with it, I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I did the first time, but it was definitely a letdown in the moment, so I am concerned for next week, but let's just hope they do something good with all of this stuff, right?
Isn't your favorite tension going into season's finale being the tension of maybe this is bad?
Yeah. It's not about the master or the Rani or anything, it's just like, is this gonna suck or is it gonna be good?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about the Rani from before, so it's gonna be exciting to go in.
It's gonna be a whole week of researching for me. I want to know some stuff.
I'm thinking I'm gonna go in as a new Who watcher and just have no idea who the Rani is, because why not? Like, yeah.
Oh, that would be fun, because then we'll have 2 different perspectives.
I love the idea. I hope you get to research the Rani for this week.
I will. I do have 3 exams this week, so we'll see how much time I have.
Yeah. That'd be fun.
So yeah, all in all, very fun episode, a lot of great bits, some not so good bits, and a lot of conversation to be had. It's going to be fun to see how the fandom reacts to this one, and just as usual, leave your comments down below. Thank you so much for 54 subscribers.
Whenever I've been editing, we've gotten more subscribers than last time we shouted out how many there was, and it's so overwhelming every single time. It's like, are people watching this? We're just yapping.
It's so fun. It's ridiculous, but we're so grateful. Thank you for the support, and don't forget to leave all your theories in the comments below, and all your thoughts about the politics, all your thoughts about writing. I personally love this episode, and it's fun to discuss the pros and cons.
Yeah, we're gonna be hanging out at Krop Tor, discussing Doctor Who,
watching the Interstellar Song Contest, repairing the space station, making sure that we don't get sucked into the black hole,
jamming out to DUGGA DOO.
Banger, by the way.
Banger.
I'm gonna DUGGA DOO. Yeah, more of that guy, please. Bring that guy back.
I feel like this is gonna be someone's Face of Bo. I love Face of Bo.
Oh yeah.
DUGGA DOO. Shout out DUGGA DOO.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for watching. Bye bye.
To the impossible. Do over. Okay. Hi, welcome to the impossible Jag tänkte någonting mer. I'm sorry. Art Life Projection. The Minister of War.